Welcome back to the Developer Tribe for episode 3 of season 2. The weeks are zipping by, but each of them gives me a chance to revisit these conversations and take in again the wisdom of the guests and getting them out to you. All of the guests offer so much of their process and practice, and this one is no different, with loads to take with us. So, as ever, thank you for being here, however you got here, and with that, let's jump in. My guest today is a consultant with For Growth and psychological and social lead with Sheffield United FC Academy. She has previous experience with the English FA as an affiliate tutor, county coach developer, and skills program team leader. Even further back, she has experience as a coach at the David Beckham Academy. It's a pleasure to welcome Sally Needham to the pod. What's going on for you today?
Snowier today, Tim.
Yes.
Yeah, we are snowed in, but I've managed to get out. I listened to a little bit of a podcast on my way out today and had a little 20 minutes out because yesterday I was sat on the laptop all day and I went to bed with a headache. So like, today I've got to get out. So just on a little walk, little podcast, that's it.
So important, isn't it? Whilst we are in a lockdown at the moment, I don't know exactly when this is going to go out, so hopefully we might be out of lockdown by then, but certainly that's the experience at the moment. What was it you were listening to? I got no problem with recommending another podcast.
I was listening actually to Dan Abraham's as one with Lisa Friedman on the 7.5 lessons of the brain.
Okay.
So yeah, so I just started that little podcast. So yeah.
Yes, it's one that I would like to get into a bit more. I've read both Dan Abraham's books, the Soccer Tough ones.
All right.
And they are fantastic. They're really well written. So yeah, I've no doubt the podcast will be the same.
Yeah, Lisa Freeman, I think her name is. She's got two little books out at the minute, and some people always keep mentioning her to me. So I thought, right, so I do a podcast, and it's easier than because I've got that many endless books I need to read. I thought I will just put it on and see what she's got to say. So yeah.
No, I've been circling you for a while then, obviously. Look, no doubt we'll get into the psychological and social realms of youth football today, as that is what you are undoubtedly expert in. But take us through how you find yourself currently heavily involved in the practice and theory of that part of youth football.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I was part of the skills program that basically Trevor Brooking introduced at the FA, and it was a 5 to 11 program, and all the training we got, and we went through the youth awards. Really did change how I coached the children and thought about the children. And I was very fortunate enough that I was one of 5, I think, from the programme to get picked to go on the pilot of the Advanced Youth Award. So that was 2012. And so I was on the 5 to 11s because they get put in ages. So 5 to 11s. And I went and did the course, and that was really the first exposure to the psych and social. So went back and delivering week in, week out with the 5 to 11s in schools, in holiday camps, in after school clubs and skills centres where the kids come and they did the football more. And the practices and things that I took on board on the Advanced Youth Award. We had to make a portfolio and 4 case studies, just seemed to be working. And it seemed the kids were flourishing in front of our eyes as children. They were excelling in their football. And I also working at a boys under 14s team at the time, grassroots. And the same was applying there, and the same were happening. They would just seem to just be flourishing. So I kind of wanted to know the how and the why, to why we do certain things, to then what's the impact of that. And I'd sit in some things and we'd talk around in work, or we'd talk around like mood lifters, or we'd talk around, we had guest speakers in quite a bit, or I'd listen to things and I'd go, well, I know that, like, you do that, you get X, but why and how is that? So I wanted to really delve down into it. And at the time I was working at Sheffield United with the girls RTC, and we had a player there that And I took them at under 16. So I'd had a coach from being 12 to 16, and I got them in the last year. With actually Gary, who worked with me at the skills programs, we were both on the psych and social. That were kind of where we put our coaching hats on. And we got the girls, and this one particular girl, I used to come home and I used to think, I'm going to kill her. Could not get in contact with her. She didn't, you could tell she didn't like me. I'd come home some weeks and I'd be crying, and I thought, I'm lucky if I keep going at this with her. And we did, and we implemented some of the stuff, and that's how it was. But I came back home, and one of my best friends were living with me at the time, and she said to me, Sally, you're looking at things the wrong way. And she'd just gone through a program of study and were working in a school, in an underdeprived school, helping the most vulnerable children with their emotional social development. And she went on to work for that company. And so she said to me, you should really look at Thrive Approach, which is the course that then I went and did. And that was very much around looking at children's emotional social development, where their brain interruptions are, what's the behaviours telling you, how you work with them to build that psychosocial, really. So I've got talk around it, the fact that the application was our grass, but I wanted to know the soil. And the Thrive Approach looked at the latest in neuroscience, child development, and attachment, and that gave me the understanding and the underpinning knowledge of understanding the soil bit below the surface. So then it kind of explained the how and the why we was seeing the kids flourish above the surface and on the grass. So that's kind of where I've got to, and then I was fascinated by it, and then just carried on and gone and did a master's in play, and then went and did one in sports coaching, but did basically the application of all that stuff that the Thrive Approach did and applied it into football. It took me about 2.5, 3 years to really apply it into application to a sense that where I could explain it and not be, it's not simple because it's a very complex subject, but in a simplistic way that we can then apply it into how we do it in football. And I think that's took me now for last couple of years to where last January, I'm thinking about me years now. Last January, I delivered it on the Advanced Youth Award. So the content got put on the Advanced Youth Award last January. And then, as you said, I've left the FA just in September, and gave me the chance to literally go into Sheffield United and apply it through all the phases. So beforehand, it were very prominent in the foundation phase, but kind of my gut feeling was it would be sit and fit across all phases. So I took my chance to go and do some consultancy work other places, and then do 2, sometimes 3 days a week at Sheffield United, inputting all the application into all the phases with the players and the coaches, really. So that's where I am.
Yeah, awesome journey. And you and I have had chance to speak about the Thrive program before, and I was very grateful for the time you offered me. My understanding of that Thrive program was that was put together for education and for a more formal classroom space.
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is. It's they do some great awareness sessions, some great CPDs. The courses are programmed really for, and they've put a model together so it helps teachers to understand the behaviours and how then they work with them through music, arts and crafts to then put the things back in that's below the surface. So it's very much for a practitioner working in a primary school or senior school, rather than a sports setting. But that's why it took me quite a bit to utilise that work and put it in a sports setting. And that's why it was brilliant for my journey through my masters to be able to, that's basically what I looked at. So just trying to put all that into a master's research project or little projects to check and challenge that work, and to also see where it sits and fits. So to get to a place where, like we said, I delivered it on the Advanced Youth Award last year.
So what were the complications in taking it from quite a formal space, obviously not designed specifically for sports coaching? I presume that some of the complications might have been that it's a more complex environment, it's more dynamic. Maybe we have the children for a shorter amount of time rather than across a full day.
Yeah.
What were the complications?
what they give you is a model to enable you then to do an online assessment, and they then give you strategies that then you can do in the classroom setting, or when you take them out to do, say, timetable, so half timetable, or and because they have them every week, every day, they could put some structure in place, or they have a specific person that dealt with them individual children, they had a specific space that dealt with them, that could enable that child to go there for a safe space. So the research and the knowledge and the content was very applicable, but I just needed to actually work it in how that then transfers into how we do it in the football element, rather than the school setting by, like I said, taking them off classroom timetable and doing some arts and crafts with them, or doing in a Thrive room where they come into that for sensory. We've not got as much of that luxury in a football academy. So what are grassroots? So how would we get some of that soil work into the football, and how then I would be able to explain it to coaches that this is what's happening below the surface when we're doing this above the surface, in a more simplistic model that enabled them, because they've got their model, same as everybody's got a model. Merit Centre in Canada's got red and the blue model, Chimp Paradox has got their model. It's basically an understanding, and we know that the brain doesn't work like that, but it's basically an understanding of being able to get then that curiosity and some knowledge into coaches to actually go, all right, then let me reframe a little bit on this and see what's actually happening under the surface. And that's why we do that. So yeah, there was some great, I love doing it. There were some great examples. It were and I'm not kidding when I say this, it was the biggest self-awareness journey I've ever had. For me personally, going through it, because you have to go through the stages and all the feeling of sensing in to all the activities, you have to do them all yourself. So yeah, it was a really monumental learning point in taking it then into the football, which yeah, it's seeming to gather a bit of momentum in the football side now. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, and obviously very glad to have you speak about it here. And you touched on the chimp paradox analogy there, and that's really my only knowledge at all of neuroscience. And even then, I wouldn't necessarily say I can recite what that book says. So, talk to us a little bit about. I believe it's the Polyvagal Theory that's one of the underpinnings of what you do. Talk to us a bit about that, and things that we could take away as coaches.
Yeah, so the Polyvagal Theory is used in trauma and in probably services with mental health and well-being, and it's a theory that got proposed in 1994. It only really come into fruition in 2009, 2011. And it fascinated me because it talks around the body and the brain, and especially a nerve called the vagus nerve that connects our brain to our body. And it enables us to understand around when we are feeling safe and regulated, we are using a certain system that links our body and our brain, which then enables us to be up for relationships, pro-social behaviours, giving really good eye contact, communication, up for learning, in this state of being our optimal state of being present in the world and up for human relationships. When we're not in that state because of certain reasons, and what it's saying is a polyvagal theory, and it's Stephen Porges' work, uses a term called neuroception, which basically is something that we are unconsciously aware of, but will work and will take threat up all the time. So it's picking up on cues and triggers from outside the world and inside us in our nervous system. So what's stored in our body and our brain, how we interpret the world, how we feel about things, how we sense in. And when we feel like we're not in that really good zone, or green zone, I call it, we go into some different zones where we have fight, flight, or freeze. And that's then shifts into a different nervous system, or part of our nervous system. So yeah, it's interesting because it's very used in, like I say, in medicine and in trauma and in child health and well-being, and a lot of people use this theory. The Thrive approach used the theory. It's not really been transferred into sport. The correspondence I have had with Stephen Porges is that my intuitions are right, that it could be looked at in sport. So that were part of my master's research project around looking, does neuroscience have a place in the foundation phase, but majority of the polyvagal theory. So yeah, so it's a new theory, like we are finding out so much all the time that we probably only know a slight amount of what's going on in our body and our brains, especially our brains. And like I say, this theory only came to fruition really 1994 it was proposed, but really into the limelight in 2009. So really early theory, and that's the thing I think with the science and the brain and the body. There's always things evolving with it, and we're getting new research come out, and it's then changing what we see about things. And I think that's what a big thing for me from going from coaching to now academia a little bit, but sitting in the middle with practitioners. There's always bits of research that goes against everything, and I think you've got to come up with something that is applicable and sits and fits, that is able for you to understand, but able for you to be able to have that conversation with somebody that maybe change their thought process or look at things slightly differently, to then add to that bit for the children. So I think, yeah, it's a fascinating world, all the brain and the body. But yeah, it's basically, I feel like the polyvagal theory is a preamble for everything else that comes with it. So it's a preamble for social connection, it's a preamble for psych and social corner, it's a preamble for learning, it's a preamble for psychological safety, it's a preamble for connection. So it's very much the preamble for everything else that comes then after it, for me.
Yeah, and when we spoke, that was the sense I got too. You know, that obviously we in academic literature, in books around coaching, there's plenty of talking about and writing about connection with players, coach-athlete relationships, and everything else that you've spoken about, and what they need to look like, and some suggestions of what practice might look like, usually without some underpinning that says, well, this is how that actually works, or why those practices actually work. So a lot of it appears to be, well, these are effective coaches by self-report, or by player report, by other coach report.
Yeah.
Let's emulate what they're doing. So this really is quite exciting. It's a way of explaining, well, what's actually going on in that space. Are there typical ways in which football coaches or the football coaching experience tends to shift players out of their social engagement system, and therefore not be able to connect with it and attend to it in a learning way?
I think it's really hard to stay in their social engagement system all the time. So there's going to be some dips in and out, and I think that's where we are building that resilience a little bit with them and putting them into areas that they're not as comfortable. The thing for me would be around, for football, is what state they come into training or the games with. If we can have certain behaviours and put certain strategies in before they even start to then train or the game, it's enabling them to try to get into that social engagement system before they start the learning. And that's a major thing for me. So before they start the learning, how they can get us, or how we can help to support what things we put into practice that enables them to get into the social engagement system in that really optimal state. So then the learning's high and optimal. They're up for the relationships in the team. They're giving eye contact, so the coaches are recognising them cues and triggers. And then also, if then they have some dysregulation, the coach's role, if they are sensed in and they are regulated and they are then their social engagement system, can notice then to help give cues of safety then and bring the children back into their social engagement system. But yeah, it's you're never going to get them in there full time because of what's in our kit and our body and our brain. I think it's understanding that we can put some things in to create or help them get into that state before they start. What do we do during it? So we talk around it all the time in football, you know, before they get the ball, on the ball, and after the ball in coaching. So what do we do in their psych safety and their body and their brain to do before they start training, while they're in training or in game, and then after? So you're looping it back into, it's not just the football, it's not just the grass stuff, like I keep saying, it's the soil stuff. And if we're working together, you are building up the soil, which enables then the grass to be grow even better. And when bad times hit, the grass will grow quicker. They'll regrow quicker because of what you've got below the soil. So yeah, so I think it's more of a practical sense.
That makes sense, and there's a couple of things I'd want to unpack there. So we'll take them one at a time. The first was, you know, that before practice, and for a long time I've been doing arrival activities with young players, preaching that to other coaches when I've been in a coach education position, and through some of my studies found connections with education through early settling tasks.
Yeah.
But had never made that connection of, well, why exactly am I doing this? I had some reasons. Yeah. Well, it's to capture kids as they come in rather than have them waiting around in case, you know, some turn up a little bit later or some turn up a little bit earlier. That makes good sense. It's to make it fun and enjoyable straight away for them. Maybe start to get them from the space that they've just left to now transitioning to where they are as a training space. But this theory, what you're working with, gives us more of an understanding of, well, why are we actually doing that?
Yeah.
Could you unpack a little bit about what is the neuroscience of what's actually going on when we as coaches put arrival activities in place?
Yeah, so a couple of things. When you put an arrival activity on, or the children go into a play state, it has some impact on their nervous system. So it settles the nervous system in their brain. So it's getting you ready for pro-social behaviours. So it's getting you ready for the learning. So there's a bit about play in our, I don't want to use the big words, but play in our nervous system that helps us then get into this state. Other couple of things is the fact that we have an innate need to play in our brain. So the more that we all have it, it's just adult form is a different style of play now. We'll probably go out for a bike ride or go socialise in the pub when we can, or, you know, go play tennis, whereas the kids has different play states or play activities when they're younger. So we've still got an innate need to play. Research shows us that 10 to 15 minutes of play enables the children to get into this state, which then lowers behaviour because their nervous system gets relaxed and in the green state and not prone for conflict, and learning goes up. So when we have 10 to 15 minutes, behaviour goes down, learning goes up. So it's getting us into this vital state. The biggest thing for me as well is 10 to 15 minutes gives the coach the time to get set up, but also to sense in. So if they've gone from work, or they've had an argument in the car, or they're busy doing loads of different stuff when they get to training and one team's coming off and one team's going on, for a child, especially a younger child, if they're not, if they become dysregulated in your session, you need an adult that is regulated to then regulate them. So a dysregulated adult cannot regulate a dysregulated child. So the sensing in allows us to just take a little bit of a deep breath. So breathing helps to soothe our vagus nerve, to get us back into our normal state, so that we can then be present with the children. Because if we're not present and in our social engagement system, we're not giving cues of safety off, we're not giving the connection off, and kids will pick up of it subconsciously. We are not being reciprocal to what they're saying, or we're listening to what they're saying. So we're misattuning to them. When we misattune to anybody, and we'll have had it, if we've sent a text to somebody that we've got a good connection with, and their text come back and you know that they've not read it properly or they're misattuned to us, it evokes an emotion and a feeling in you. So the kids will go through the same, which then just escalates and escalates and escalates. So arrivals for me has got numerous ones. One for the children, because of the innate need to play. Learning goes down, behaviour goes up, and it helps to regulate the nervous system to get them into that pro-social behaviour state. And then the other one's for the coach to sense in, to be present in the moment with the kids, and to be regulated.
A brilliant example of where this underpinning can really start to give us an awesome sense of these practices that we do and what they're for, how they work. So if I could unpack that a little bit further, I was thinking about, you said play there a number of times as something that helps then the children get into their own regulated space. What level of, and I appreciate this will be different by age, so I'm perhaps not asking a fair question, but what level of challenge should coaches be looking to apply in arrival activities? You know, I've seen the full gambit of it, where it's, you know, it's pretty much free play. Just go and enjoy your own game, go and set up your own game even. And I've seen the complete opposite, where it's a drill that perhaps might be written on a whiteboard. Go and have a look, set it up, have a go at it. And clearly there'll be differences between age and ability as to where you're setting this. But I guess why I'm asking, long question this, I guess what I'm asking is, does the level of challenge of the arrival activity have a positive or negative effect on what we're trying to achieve here?
I would say this comes back to the old thing of the youth awards about you need to know your children. So there's also the element of you know what you want to get out of the session. So I'm the same. I will say either you can have a standalone arrival activity, and then do your session, or your arrival activity can go into your session, so it can be a follow on. The thing for me is to think around why we get it, why we're doing what we're doing in the arrival, what does it get out of? So if you think around at the minute with COVID, so it might be the fact that you have some free play. Look, this is your equipment. You've got 10 minutes, pick a mate, go set up your own game. So you're allowing them that social interaction because they might not have seen their friends for a while. It might be the fact that it's absolutely banging it down in the middle of winter. So you're not going to then go, right, we'll just have a little bit of soccer tennis. It might be, right, this is what we're going to do arrival activities. The thing for me is the difference in ages. Kids still want to do the same stuff. So sometimes our under 7s want to do the same as our under 14s. The slight difference I would say is with the adolescent brain, or when they're coming into them, that like 12s, 13s, 14s, 15s, I would sometimes give them a choice, because they need a lot of choice and a lot of ownership at that stage, because they don't have as much in their social setting, in their school setting, as choice and ownership. So sometimes with the little ones, we'll do like 2 choices, and sometimes the older ones we do 5 choices. Or we'll say, look, boys, it's raining tonight, or girls, it's raining tonight. You can either do this or you do this. What's your choice? So it's a really hard question, because I think with all this stuff with about the brain and the body and application, if you know why and why you're doing what you're doing and how it works, I think then you can then see where they are in their development, or what's going off through the week. Is it bonfire night? Is it last week of half term, which is a nightmare? Is it a Friday? So Fridays I'd do very unstructured arrival activity. So it's all dependent on where the kids are and what we feel that they need. And we've got to sometimes give the kids the chance to make some choices, set their own games up, work it together, especially in the climate we've had at the minute, that they've not had that social interaction. Because the human connection with people that they feel safe with, from their tone of their voice and from their facial, by doing a bit of soccer tennis across a net or across a line, or just making their own line up, actually, again, helps to regulate the nervous system, because we do a lot of threat off our voice and our facial cues and triggers.
It's a really good point, and there's going to be a lot of young people through these lockdown periods that have not had the chance to have social engagement with friends, wider range of people, and will have lost some of those skills, or certainly the refinement of some of those skills. So it's a really good point we do have a responsibility to provide them with some of that.
Yeah, and you just made a great point, the fact that they might have lost some skills. They will be thinking that. They'll be thinking, when I go back to football or when I go back to school, I wonder if they're still going to be my friends. I wonder if my coat peg is going to still be there. I wonder if they're going to be wondering all these different things. So even more so to give them the time to actually connect back in and actually go, oh no, I'm all right, I'm fine. Like, they're still my friends, and I'm still got my coat peg where it is, and I'm still doing this at school, and they're still my teacher. And I think that's a major thing, that they'll be worrying about what's going to happen when they get back into it. So yeah.
No, it's a good point. Thank you for picking up on it. And so I said there were two things I wanted to pick up on.
Yeah.
We've spoken a lot about players there, but you made the point a number of times, and some of my other guests on this podcast have made similar points, but in different ways, that the coach is obviously complicit in this process.
Yeah.
You use the term dysregulation and regulation. I've heard it spoken about in similar ways of, the self-awareness of the coach.
Yeah.
Clearly, we have to be aware of ourselves and where we are in order to be able to operate in this way. You mentioned around breathing. Are there any other, or in fact, unpacking that one a little bit, are there any other principles or practices that the coach can do in order to maintain a sense of regulation?
Breathing's a really good one. I would say people need to find that out themselves. But the big thing for us is mindfulness and breathing. There's loads of research that backs that up, and it links back into our vagus nerve. So I would just say my top tip would be, when you're on the pitch and you're setting up, just take some deep breaths or count to 10. So the breathing element is massive. That's why probably Ronaldo does what he does before he has his free kick. His vagus nerve, it's also your vagus nerve. But yeah, I think coaches need to think that out themselves, because we're all so different. But if you have got 5-10 minutes before you start coaching, just walking away, setting up, taking some deep breaths, talking to yourself, getting yourself regulated is basically what I would suggest. Yeah.
And brilliant suggestions. And for most of us, as coaches, the coaching experience is something that we look forward to most of during the day, during the week. I can count hundreds of experiences I've had where I've been in a terrible mood going to coaching, and then 5-10 minutes into a session, I'm bouncing around. It's one of the reasons I love doing it.
Yeah.
But in talking to a lot of coaches over a long period of time around social emotional competency development of their players, the missing piece seems to be quite consistently their understanding of it themselves.
Yeah.
And understanding of those skills themselves. And one of the things that seems to come up quite regularly is, yes, we might start to notice it. We may respond poorly to something in a session. We may notice that what we bring to the session has an emotional contagion and has an issue, and then we beat ourselves up about it. And of course, the session's still going on. So, like you say, that it's important to notice it, but also important to have coping strategies ourselves in order to be able to regulate, bring us back round to the session, and make sure it's still successful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I've noticed it more when I've been doing in situ supports with coaches, because they'll be stood there and that they're literally just surviving on the side, because you can see from the eye contact, they're not giving much communication. They're literally, you can tell they're just in emotional hijack, and they're not thinking, they're not seeing the pictures, they're not going, what's going wrong. And then you ask them at the end and they just go, I don't know. and because your thinking is offline. So when we're just, it's like when we have an argument and then an hour later we think, why didn't I say that when they said that? Because we're not thinking, we're just surviving. And I think I've noticed that more of the coach is really trying to, and the big thing is to sense in, you're right. So to sense in, to catch that emotion, to work with it, because it's going to come, feelings and emotions, and slight differences in them, but they're going to come. So we need to kind of work with it. And I think that's what comes back to that bit about my self-awareness journey on the Thrive approach. Definitely made me realise more about myself and my actions and my behaviours. But until somebody really shines a light on that, you don't really know. And unless you're in your social engagement system, there's no real chance of reflecting and changing your behaviours, because we get programmed in. And the more we have those negative experiences, the more our body gets us ready for that experience again, that our defensive behaviours are already up before we start. And it's like this period of time now, a lot of people's defensive behaviours will be higher and ready to keep them safe in that response than what they are normally, because of what we're going through. So yeah, I think it's understanding where we are and your body, and understanding all those emotions and feelings, and like you said, sensing in and catching it. But the coach's role in helping especially younger children with cues and safety and keeping them in that optimal state is really pivotal. And like I said, your face and your tone of voice is massive with that. But yeah, so it's interesting. It's a journey, definitely a journey when you start coaching.
No, of course. I think one of those barriers that can be put up by coaches when learning this type of thing is that experience of it as being theory dense, whether that's actually true or not, but certainly by their perception, it's theory dense. And you've done a really good job already today of not going into too much of the scientific language that might make it inaccessible for us. How do you navigate that when you're working with coaches? Are you conscious of the language that you're using in order to get an effective relationship with that coach?
Twofold with that. One, if I'm talking around the science stuff, very conscious, and it's took me a long time to get to this stage. Because I was learning it, so you learn it as you get taught it, and then I have to apply it. So I'm now seeing it in action. So every day now I'm seeing it in action. Two thing about language, and it's probably going off what you've asked me, but language is pivotal. Is I'm very conscious about what language I use because of where it hits our nervous system. So the language that we use, even though we may perceive it to be what we think it to be, somebody else's perception of that language could be totally different. And when we are in a different state, some of the language doesn't help because it doesn't attune and validate to our nervous system and our brain. So we just keep in that defensive behaviours. Whereas language for me, and it's a big topic, it's massive. And one of my big things on language is when we talk around moving up and down. So like you went up to the 13s today and then down to the 12s, and we just naturally say it in football. And the impact of what up and down in a word sense, we are stored in our body, in our brain, that we subconsciously, and is all around us in our environment, in the world, and on the telly and everything. We have an association with that up is good and down is bad. And so it affects then what we then perceive that to be in our perception. And so language for me, if it misattunes to what we perceive it to be in our brain and our body, it really has sometimes a really big impact. So the language that I use with coaches and with players, I'm conscious of because of where it hits in the body and the brain and the nervous system. And I think sometimes if you get that wrong, you have to admit you get that wrong. So I got that wrong for you tonight, and I can see that. So yeah, language is a really big area. So I think I've diversed a little bit, but just it was because you said you mentioned language, which is a fascinating point for me at the minute.
No, and thank you for exploring it. What came up for me when you said playing up and down is some experiences I've had in the US. I was out there twice, and playing up an age group, as anyone who's coached over there will know, is an absolute fascination for parents, and an obsession for quite a number of parents,
Yeah,
and striking a balance between their perceptions of that being ostensibly good and implicitly good, always good, and the actual potential developmental benefits of it is
yeah,
very, very difficult to do.
yeah.
Um, Sometimes with a whole team, sometimes with individual parents. There's obviously a place for it. How do you feel about using the language of playing across? Does that
Yeah,
mediate it?
I think we've done it a while for playing across, and I get some comments, but the boys see that you move across, so they see that you're going across. Um, if then we have it as a cross, we've not got a connotation like you said around it's because of a developmental challenge or a developmental thing. It's how we package it and the wording and and the frame. I think for me as well is if we move them up in a sense, if you want to work it like that, but if we move them across or with the 13s, then if they're not in their social engagement system, then the challenge is not there anyway because they're just surviving that session. So we have to be really careful of using that developmental challenge for the right reason, but there's a starting point of they've got to be psychologically safe. So some of the work we're doing at the minute is there's transition periods that now are going to come out in academies, and there's transition periods all the time if you don't move up with your through the phases as such with your players. So it's that element again of feeling safe and secure and connected to the coach, because otherwise if they go, some children will be able to go to a different group and will be totally fine with it. Some children will be worried about what's coming next and will just be surviving. So the challenge that we perceive them to be getting for that night is non-existent. So yeah, so across with, I don't know what the word is, but what you'll see when you're moving them is across. So just the word across is on a level par. So on a level par, it just gives something in the brain. Actually, I'm just moving across. And I've had quite a lot of conversations with players that have gone up and then back down from up to a first team down to development team. And because it wasn't explained to them why, and it might just be the fact that there's a lack of numbers, so they need to fill the numbers in, then they perceive it that they were doing really well and they've got enough, there were enough ability to get to the first team, and then now they're playing in the development team, they're not starting. So it's that then mindset and thinking trap that then the players get into that then has that negative impact on them. Some might, some won't. So I think it all comes back to being curious around what's the behaviours telling you, reframing and the language that we use massive to how we put that challenge to them, and then being in that psychological safety. But yeah, I'm a big thing on I don't like the up and down, and
Well,
that's just me personally. But I would definitely it across.
I'm on board. I'm not even fully okay with a cross, but I think more importantly, as you said, context is king.
Yeah,
Um, it's about making sure that that context is really known to the players and to the coaches. I've been most uncomfortable when I've been involved in situations where players have gone up an age group rather than
yeah,
just up, but up an age group. And it's all the best. Let's see how they cope. And that implicitly it's if they cope, that's a really good thing. And it's validated the process. If they don't cope, well, maybe they're not the player we thought they were.
Yeah.
That feels dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're touching on some controversial ground, really, but um, um, yeah, I would imagine, I'm guessing, the players that have had a good experience and feel it's a development tool, or coaches that it's a development tool, have probably had a good experience of it, or seen the benefits of it with certain players. My other side of it would be, have we noticed or recognised when it's not been a good experience for certain players? Or have we just gone, we've only noticed it when it's been a good experience? Research just tells us that playing up is a good developmental tool because it's giving them that challenge. Is there a better way of giving them challenge? I don't know. Is there an element of, for me, I would personally think that they need to be in their social engagement system and feel connected to the group before they even go into that challenge, or the benefit of that challenge on that night. I think this is where it comes into a sense of the benefit of the club or the players being connected across the whole club, coaches being connected across the whole club. And I think that's where sometimes you'll get a club, but you'll get pockets of teams. So they're all a collection of teams that make up one club. Whereas if then you have a working model where everybody knows everybody, there's some connection, you'll have different experiences and personalities, but there's some consistencies in, this is what we're going after, these are our boundaries, these are what we expect. But the personalities will be different anyway, the sessions will be different, but you've got some continuity that creates some safety that enables you to then move the players around. And I've talked this week around, do we move the players because if it were from a psych and social angle, I'd go, right, I'd look at my players and I'd go, these are the behaviours we want in. Who's actually developing them? Or where are the emerging behaviours in the children? Where are the children that are securing them behaviours? And where are the children that are performing them behaviours on a regular basis? So you won't go under 11s, under 12s, under 13s. We'd go, actually, where are them children that are displaying these behaviours? And where do they need the developmental stuff? Do they need this week? Do they need that week? So there's no set, you're under 11s, your foundation phase, your IDP phase, you're this. But that's a really idealistic model that's in my head, and that's just how it probably where it'll stay.
Oh, well, I hope not. Maybe we'll have a chance of it getting there, and when it does, I'm sure you'll find ways to talk about it and support other clubs and other coaches with it. I just wanted to sort of say that, to summarize it, of, using any tool that is available to us as a coach just requires us as coaches to be connected with it. It's not enough to say, yeah, this worked, or it has worked, so it will work again in this situation. We've got to monitor it, notice what's going on for it, and if it doesn't quite work in the way that we expected it to or wanted it to, that's okay, but let's make sure we stay connected with it and we can start to adjust it for that player, for us, for the club we're working for, and the rest of it.
Yeah, and I think a big thing for that is know the child. So you need to know the child. You really need to know the child and the experiences that they've had before, and then notice how their behaviours are in the session. And like you say, if it doesn't work, then be honest and say, I think we got that wrong for you. And I think, especially in the academy system, the power is held with the coach, whether we want to say it's not, it is. And even if we can make this amazing environment, the boys still know at the end of the day that the coach holds the power for they release or they retain. So enabling that child to actually be open enough to say, I really struggled tonight, or you know what, we're playing in a cup final on the weekend, or we're playing in a perceived bigger club, and it's in a brand new facility that we don't play in that facility every week, and I'm actually so nervous about that. It needs to become more prevalent especially within the boys' side, and that's what I'm saying. The challenges, the boys will do it because we've asked them to do it, but actually we need to have some input and some ownership and check and challenge it with the boys, and also observe the behaviours. And if we got it wrong, we got it wrong, but we really need to know the child. We need to know the experience that they've come with, what they've been, what's going on in their lives at that point, because it could be totally different then, you know, with when you put them into that challenge. I have a massive thing around like the week or two before Mother's Day, or the week or two before Father's Day, and then the week two after it. We've got to recognise that some of the behaviours will be different than weeks because of what background certain children have. So putting them into a different challenge, it would be. So we just need to be aware of it. And people said to me, well, it's what develops resilience, and you know, they'll have to get used to these challenges. And I'm like, yeah, life is challenging, I get that. But you know what? As a child, they don't need as much interruption in their challenging behaviours because they're going to get it anyway in life. You know, and unfortunately they might have got it anyway because they might have lost a parent, they might have had split ups, everything else that goes with it. So, you know, can we put safe challenges in to help them and stretch them, but getting them ready for the real world, really, if we can put as much soil in as we can in them formative years, you're giving them the soil and the capacity to cope with them challenges in life, not giving them too early to get them set up, because all we're doing is repeating bad experiences in such informative years. So yeah, so I think I've gone a bit of my bandwagon there, didn't I?
No, I know, and a really, really valuable point for us to absorb, and one that's made frequently, and rightly so, you know, in various different ways, with both of us having worked for the FA, you know, that know the player to coach the player style phrase, you know, that's come up a number of times. I always found that player was called Johnny. I don't know where that was. That the
Yeah.
same for you?
Yeah, that was same for me. That was the youth mod one.
This poor lad gets banded about across the UK. Look, thank you so much for your time on it. If bearing in mind what we've said about knowing context, noticing your own space, could you give us 3 of your top tips for improving our practice in this space?
Do you know what? Something we haven't touched on, but would be, so one would be arrival activities, which we've touched on. The second one would be structure board. So a structure board, so the children know what's happening that night. Also, you will then, as well, linking into the arrival activities, the coaches will not have the comments of what we're doing tonight, we're playing at weekend, we're playing at weekend. And there's 2 reasons why the children ask that, because some children need to know what's coming next for safety. So, and when we said to them, just concentrate on what we're doing tonight, or concentrate on this, they can't concentrate on it because the body and the brain and the nervous system's going, what we're doing next, there's uncertainty. So when we said to kids, just focus on the game, I'll talk to you later. So structure boards enables that to kind of help them get in that state then before they arrive to this. So as they come in, some children will check the structure boards, some won't. Simple as that. Some children need it, some children don't. Check the structure boards, they're into arrival activity, they're ready into that state. So structure boards and arrival activity is my first top 2. My third one would be the coach. So the thing would be around, what's your face saying to your players? So have that in your back of your mind all the time. And then linking back into the coach again is, when we see a child differently, we see a different child. So notice and sensing what we have, or our perceptions of certain children with labels or behaviours, and try and look at it slightly a little bit differently. That would be my 3.
Excellent. Thank you so much. One last question for you.
Yeah.
You could have an audience with just one person. Who would that be?
Audience with one person. I would say my grandma. We lost her 2.5 years ago now, and she was pivotal to my development, my personality. I look back now and realise, when I did my training at Thrive, how much she gave me my emotional social development, and then how much now I am about with her and stuff. So if I could have one person, it will be back with my grandma.
Yeah, what an awesome choice. What do you think you would ask her straight? What do you think she'd ask you straight away?
I'll just, she, what would she ask me straight away? I can't say on here because I know I can't say on
All
here.
right, well, we'll leave it there. Sally, thank you so much for your time today. There's so much value in everything that you've unpacked for us. So really, really appreciate it. And just leaves me to say welcome to the tribe.
No problem. Thank you.
That's it for episode 3 of season 2. Nuggets of knowledge all over the place in that one. For me, what Sally has to say adds context and understanding to so many coach behaviours and practices at a different level than is more readily considered in coach education. More valuable conversations to be had in this vein for sure. The music you are listening to is by BB Phoenix. Her online discography and further details are in the links. As ever, thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope this finds you well, and we look forward to seeing you back here again next week.